This toolbox is made from 6mm plywood. Most people think 6mm, too thin, too weak for a box like this, but they're wrong. The problem is just bad joinery. My 3.5-year-old son really wanted a blue toolbox. I don't know why, he's just been talking about it. He probably saw it in a book and now it's stuck in his mind. So I wanted to make him one, but I wanted it to be really light and I wanted it to be really strong. And I didn't want it to take me ages. So I came up with a system that I could use 6mm ply and I could do all the joinery using one router bit with one router setup that I don't even need to move the fence, and it is really nice and strong. So hopefully this will withstand the abuse of a toddler and last him many, many years. Maybe he'll even put it in his workshop one day. People often avoid using 6mm ply or 1/4 inch ply for this kind of work because they're worried the box will feel flimsy or it'll rack or twist or just won't be strong enough. And so they end up using thicker plywood or they reinforce the internal joints with a bead. But really they're solving the wrong problem because the plywood itself is absolutely strong enough. You've just got to solve the join. For simple boxes like this, the temptation is just to do a butt joint where you've got one piece of timber just butting right up to the other. But the issue is we've got not very much glue surface area, and often that glue surface area is involving end grain, whether it's plywood or in real timber. And that joint just is not very strong. So you can reinforce it with pins, but they look ugly. And also, putting pins in 6mm timber is really challenging to not have them come through the sides. Okay, I got one. Let's see how many more I can do without flying out the side. Okay, I got 4 in before I had one punch through the wall of the ply. Now, even on thicker ply, this can happen, but it's especially difficult on thin ply. I use this gun non-stop for lots of work. I'm really confident with it, and I probably could have come through this whole thing without punching through the side, but it still happens to me and it's still hard to fix. So, the joint I ended up using is a half-lap rebate joint. It doubles the glue surface area, and I can do it with a single router bit, this tiny 3mm bit here, and only one router table setup. The joint consists of a rebate cut into one side and a groove cut into the other side. And it creates a corner join that is very strong and perfectly flush with no internal bracing and no overhangs. I've cut all my plywood blanks, got my ends, the base and the sides, and now I need to make sure that I've marked where I want those router slots to be cut so that when I get over to the router table, I know exactly what I need to be doing and I have everything where I need it to be. If you had something that was figured, it had beautiful grain and you wanted to choose what was going to be visible and not, now's the time to do that. This is 6mm marine ply. I don't need to choose which side looks good or which side is going to be visible because it all looks the same and I'm going to be painting it. So I just need to make sure that I've got the alignment right so that I put my rebates in the correct spot. Okay, I've got dotted lines where I need to do the trench channel, and I've got a solid line where I need to do the rebate. Okay, so the way that this join works, and the reason why I like it so much, is that it is done with one router bit, one router table setup that you do not change. So the router bit and the fence stays in the same position when you're cutting the groove and when you're cutting the rebate. The timber or the plywood that we're using is 6mm thick. Now, this technique is scalable. So if you're doing 12mm thick timber, you can use this as well. You just have to scale everything up. The router bit we're using is 3mm. It is half the thickness of the plywood that we're using. What that allows us to do is to cut a little 3mm groove or a slot in the timber, and then, without changing the fence, cut a 3mm rebate in the opposing piece. You can see on this diagram here, the slot depth and width is exactly half the thickness of the material, and that's how you would scale this. So if you're using 12mm ply, you'll need to use a 6mm router bit. And the way that you set this up is the router bit, in this case, is 3mm thick. It's a spiral down cut bit, which gives me really clean cuts. It sits 3mm above the table, and there's a 3mm gap between the blade and the fence. So when we're cutting our groove, that 3mm gap sitting between the blade and the fence forms the back of our groove, and we run the groove pieces horizontally flat on the table. When we go to cut our rebate, that 3mm gap between the blade and the fence becomes our tongue, or the back, the long part of the rebate. And so this runs between the router bit and the fence. Now, there is a safety note here. If you are running timber between the router bit and the fence, it's actually trying to kick you the opposite direction that routing operations normally do. With a small piece like this, it just doesn't matter. But with a big piece, it can grab the piece of timber and throw it. So you can either reverse cut or just put some featherboards in place so that you are really aware of the direction that the router table is trying to push the timber, and you're working with that in mind. If you get this set up right, which you can sneak up on it, it's not terribly difficult, it means that you set it up once and you can do a bunch of boxes without ever changing the fence or the height of the bit. Okay, so that joinery is cut and tight, and you can see that this thing is just holding itself together, which makes glue up really easy. I think we can probably just glue this up with tape. If you were doing this out of larger timber, thicker ply, then you could use clamps, but this is really thin and it just doesn't need it. If you wanted to do this out of solid timber, just be aware of the grain direction. It's possible that you will need to use a floating plywood bottom rather than a glued in structural plywood bottom like I can with this whole thing being out of plywood. And the reason for that is that if you've got real timber in here, it's expanding and contracting at different rates depending on the grain direction. So be aware of that. You don't want to make a box that blows itself apart. That is speaking from experience. Right now, this thing is not glued, so we can tap it apart, and now is the chance to figure out where the handle is going to go, any shaping on these sides, any sanding of any burn marks, etc., pencil marks on the inside. They're going to be really hard to sand later, and then we can glue it back together. Clamps are off, everything needs a little sand and then a coat of paint. I'm not going to use a big round over on anything here. I mean, the ply is tiny, so the round over would have to be tiny, but I'm just going to soften all these edges with sandpaper and make sure there's no rough patches, and then we're ready to go. So Rafi said he wanted blue, so he's getting blue. This is a water-based paint that I love. It dries really quickly, it's really thin. And what that means is that on timber, you can actually see the grain, you can see that it's still wood. I'm not trying to cover it up completely, and I really like that. Rafi won't care either way. I love the look of this painted. Hopefully it passes the toddler test. It is so light and so strong. I think he's gonna really love it. You can just feel the strength in these joins, and it makes the plywood feel stiffer. Plywood really is the right material for this job, and with the right join, it can be a very strong and versatile material. Okay, so the reason this works so well is you've got a single router setup. You don't need to move the fence. You barely even need to measure anything. You can set it all basically registering off the timber itself. Second, because this is all out of plywood and we don't have to worry about expansion and contraction, the bottom becomes a structural element. The bottom piece is housed in exactly the same way that the side joints are, which means it's captive in there. It's not just butt jointed the whole way around. It can't fall out, and it forms a structural element that keeps the entire thing stiff. The third reason I love this is the joins position themselves. So when you apply glue and some clamps or some tape, if it's small enough, you don't need to get the position right. The joints hold their own position. That means that you could almost put this thing together without glue or with minimal glue, and it will still hold together. That means all of that makes glue up so much simpler and so much more accurate, and will keep all of your corners looking really nice. The fourth reason this works so well is we've got great glue surface area. Every single one of those joints has twice the amount of surface area of a standard butt joint, and you've got a tongue captured in a groove. So you've got a really strong joint that's going to stay square, held square by the bottom, and it's easy to go together. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you make one of these yourself. Let me know if you have any questions down below. And please, if you've enjoyed this, like the video and subscribe to the channel. I know you hear it on every single video, but it really helps us out. I love making these videos for you guys. I get a lot out of it. I hope you do too. And by subscribing to the channel, it just supports what we do, and it helps YouTube show this to more people, which means I can make more videos. So click the subscribe button, and I'll be back next week with some other project. There will be links down below to some of the products I've used, such as the router bit and a few other bits and pieces. Until then, see you next week. Happy making.